Welcome back, everybody, to Light Talk, where everyday people can tell their spiritual journey stories with a safe and supportive community. If you'd like to be a guest on the show, email lighttalk423 at gmail.com, or in the comments below, type guest please. And while you're at it, please click on your like, share, and subscribe buttons. Well, let's get going. Tell us what you do for a living and start your story.
Well, actually, I'm retired now, but my story started when I was 15 and my sister was 5. And she would tell us things happening in our house. She kept seeing a man walking around growing up, and we all thought, there was something wrong because she would tell us things, and we're like, we don't see it. Well, as it turned out, as we kind of grew up together and got older, my folks would come visit us, and she had a friend spend the night, and that friend spent one night in the house and would not return back to the house. So it was kind of like, okay, there's more going on in the house that we never knew.
Uh-huh.
Well, as it happens, this is how I started to believe more and more. My sister, um, she she got married, I got married, and we moved away. So when we came back to visit, we'd stay either with our in-laws or my parents. Well, as it turned out, the last minute we switched, and I stayed with my parents and she stayed with her in-laws. And that night she had told me how grandpa had come with my step grandmother, and she never knew either one because she was just born when he passed.
Mm-hmm.
But she described him. My mom pulled out pictures. He would tell her things, and she'd go, Mom, what about this silver spoon? Oh, how do you know about that? My grandfather had given it to my mom. So things that nobody would know about, my sister would know about. And as it turned out that night, we just got into bed, and the bedroom is in the back of the house. And all of a sudden, this glowing light was in the doorway. And of course, my first reaction was I screamed.
Yeah.
But then I realized my sister said Grandpa had turned into a glowing light. And then we heard, my husband heard it too, heard the footsteps go down the hallway, and it was gone. So as life went on, my sister moved to Minneapolis, and she was telling us some things about happening in her house. And I'm like, really? I said, well, being a religious person, I said, go in and tell this whatever in your house to go away, leave, bless the house and cast it out. Well,
Yeah.
she did that. Guess what? The next day she called and said, my sewing machine sprung. They unraveled my material because she did upholstery work. So she had a lot of things that were attached to her that she picked up a lot. And we always thought, okay. Well, as life went on, we went and stayed with them in another state and spending the day with her. Her and I were sitting on the couch. Our kids were sitting on the floor, and our husbands were gone. Well, all of a sudden, this cold breeze goes right beside us, and I'm going, and it had my perfume on. And I said, what the heck is this? And she said, that is the ghost in my house. We bought an old banister, and it came with the banister. And I'm like, okay, if I hadn't felt it and smelt it, I would have thought, okay, she's crazy. There's no such thing as ghosts, spirits, whatever. Well, as life went on, we've had different experiences over and over and over again. Well, as we got older, her and I are kind of like zing and zang, or what do you want to call it?
Yin and yang.
Yang and yang. Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Yes. My mother had passed away, and before she did, we were back there with her, and all of a sudden, the room's like 80 degrees, and all of a sudden, I got so cold, the hair stood up on my arms. And I was standing beside my mom, telling her I loved her, and she couldn't move, talk, or anything. She was pretty much in a coma. And all of a sudden, I told my sister, they're here for mom. And my sister, being able to see, I can feel, she goes, you're right, they're here. There's dad and a bunch of my mom's relatives and stuff. And then within a second or two, she passed. So it's kind of like, you have to also have a little bit of religion to believe this too, because I'm like, okay, I know. Well, then as things went on over the years, my husband had some serious health issues, and we had like a little stained glass thing. It was behind a drape, and it was behind a planter, and it had, if it would have fallen, it should have gone straight down to the floor. Somehow we went to some of his classes and came home, and that stained glass had flown from the windowsill somehow around the drape, around my planter, over a chair, and landed up under my dining room table. And I'm like, okay, well, my husband was talking to, he walks and he was talking to one of the neighbors, and he was telling her the weird things that had happened. I have like a blue thing in the living room that's supposed to be good luck. That had flown off the windowsill and also landed under my library table. And I go, what is going on in this house? So we had a friend come, a friend's friend, actually, now she's our friend, come to our house. And she walked right in and she goes, do you know this person? And she gave us a name. And I said, no. And then I go, oh, we bought the house from that person. And then she goes into the kitchen and says, okay. Now we had never met this lady before. And she goes into the kitchen and she said, they're fighting in the kitchen and they're speaking Spanish, but I can't understand what they're saying. And I said, that was the couple we bought our house from, but they hadn't passed. And she said, there's such a thing as a residual that they can leave
No.
behind.
Yeah.
Even though they haven't passed, this was their house. And I'm like, oh my gosh. Okay. So then she goes on and we told her about, this tile, this stained glass thing flying. And she gets and touches it and she says, do you know this person? And I go, no. And she goes into more detail and she said, okay, this person wants you to know that it's between him and his mom's death when they both died. And he had died in 1 month and she had died 2 months earlier. So it was kind of in the middle of there. And that he went to visit his mom when she passed. So he was there to greet her. And we're like, okay, this is all making sense. This is my husband's brother, his mother, and she knew names. She knew his wife's name. Now, granted, we're in completely opposite states. There's no way she could get any of this information, of where we lived in a different state and grew up. So she was telling us all this stuff. And I'm like, okay. And you're still a little skeptic going, how does she know all this stuff? Well, then she goes into our spare room and she walked out. She goes back into our spare room. She walked out. And she said, I would not sleep in that bedroom. And I said, what? Well, I knew the bed frame was really old. It was my great grandma's, and I never knew her, but I love the bedroom set. And she said, just the frame, get rid of it. And I said, something happened on that bed, didn't it? Because I had had nightmares. My daughter had had nightmares.
Huh.
I know, and we're not Catholic, but I actually got holy water and blessed it because my daughter was having terrible nightmares.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I actually got rid of it. And she came back, months later, and she said, okay, now I would sleep in your room because the bed was evil. And I'm like,
Right.
okay, something had attached it. And I can't go into detail what she said, all that, but it was really bad. It was something you didn't want to be around.
Yeah.
Well, then she goes in our main bedroom, walks in the bathroom, comes back out, and she says, you have a little lady that lives here with you. And I said, what? She said, you've got a spirit, gave me her name, her nationality. We did some ancestry and found out that my husband's great great grandmother's name, and she was also from Germany, where they said this little lady was.
Oh,
And
cool.
she said, do you want me to get rid of her? And I said, she's not causing any harm. We don't mind sharing. You know, I mean,
Yeah.
you just kind of go, okay. So if something happens in the house, I usually go, Helene, what are you doing? But this lady is a medium and she came in and told us so many things. And then um, another time when she came back, she said, standing in our bedroom, she goes, I hear classical music. I said, thank you. Because at night, I would lay in bed and hear classical music. Well, there's nobody around us to play classical music. So it's like,
Uh-huh.
okay. And she told us, if you have, I mean, it's progressed that my husband hears it. We hear people talking, but we can't understand their words. And she told me one of the things to do is to tell them, hey, I'm going to bed at this time. Either you be quiet or I cast you out. She also said if you want to get rid of them, you take sage and cleanse your whole house with sage.
Hmm.
And I do that every so often just to take out any bad vibes in our house.
Good idea.
And then I'm thinking, okay, is all this for real? Am I just, and then um I called her. We had gone back from my mom's funeral, and this was the second time I talked to her. And I said, I just want to let you know, Helene really is a relative, and she is a little lady that was from Germany. And the whole thing was, and she said, stop right there. And she went into detail saying, this is your mom. This is what she looked like. She was met by my dad and his name. And she went on to say she was also met by a set of twin girls. And one started with A. And I go, okay, now I believe her because my sister lost a set of twins, and Alicia was one of them. And
Wow.
so it's like, nobody would know that. They only live 15 minutes. And this is in another state completely. So it was like,
Wow.
okay, I really believe her. And then she went on to say, which really helped me get through my mom's loss, is your mom is here. She tells you she loves you, and she wants you to know she doesn't have dementia anymore. Well, the medium didn't know my mom had dementia. I had never talked about my mom. And she said, oh, and by the way, your parents have already played a game of cards, because they played cards every night,
Yeah.
And so it's like, okay, there is more out there that we can't touch, see, feel. It's there. And you have to open your eyes to different things. Um, and then she's
Yeah.
come back a few times and told us some other things. She went through our house, and um, we're kind of a collector and have collected a lot over the years of, for selling and things like that. And she went in our basement where I have racks of clothes that I'm selling and things like that. And she said, it's too busy down here. And I said, excuse me? She goes, all your things you have collected were too much for her. She couldn't handle all that vibe information. And she said sometimes she has to put something around her to stop it,
Oh, yeah.
you know? And then,
Yeah.
yeah, otherwise she says, I'm getting all this information and people are saying, what? Well, we've met with her. My daughter, um, when her mother-in-law passed, she wanted to meet with this medium, and
Hmm.
we did. And she brought her husband and the kids, and we met and had lunch. And then all of a sudden, the medium says, this, and this about her husband's mom. Well, she didn't know. Different town completely.
Yeah.
And she said, I don't know what all this means. Well, my son-in-law knew exactly what it meant. Exactly.
Wow.
And because she said, I see a man in a uniform holding a check. She said, I'm not sure what he's saying. Well, as it turned out, he was the first fireman to ever get paid in this town, from volunteer to paid. And
Wow.
nobody would know that. And then, I mean, she went on with so much information that we were talking, and we met another time. We were talking. Oh, before that case, this lady said that um, her mother-in-law trained dogs. She did service dogs and all this stuff. And it's like, yeah, she did. She was in a wheelchair and she actually trained service dogs. So nobody would know all this information. So there is information out there, but you also have to be open to it.
Yeah,
I mean,
for
to
sure.
be, acceptable. You have to understand that there is things out there that we can't always explain, but it's there.
Right. When you
You-
were talking about hearing voices and stuff in the background, here recently I've been driving to work. I have no radio on. Um, it's early in the morning, so there's no other traffic to be hearing somebody else's radio. And the roads I take don't have other cars on it as many. So I'm driving and I've been hearing like a distant radio, like there's some talking on the radio. So I'm hearing those too here lately, and it's
yeah,
like I
and
got to
it's
get
like,
more in tune with them.
what are they telling you? You kind of want to know, what are they telling you?
Yeah,
I
What are they
mean,
saying? It's just so distant. You can hear that they're talking, but you can't understand what they're saying.
yep.
It's just, what are you saying? Come closer so I can hear you.
Do you
You
want him to come
know?
closer? But yeah, it's amazing what you pick up. I mean,
Mhm.
another time we met and she wanted my daughter met again with her and wanted to know about a fireman who had fallen off a condo building. And he hadn't come through to her yet, but it was funny because my my daughter was talking to her and then all of a sudden she said, "Do you know this person?" And I go, "Well, I don't know." And she said, "Well, she thinks you're acting silly because I was teasing my grandson." And I go, "Oh, yes, I know that person. That's my aunt." And she knew exactly that she had made drapes and all this information. Well, nobody knew this,
Yeah.
Even my daughter didn't know that my aunt made drapes for a living. So she knew all this information. Well, in also talking with her, she said, "There's somebody by the name of Pat behind you." And I said, "Behind me?" And she said, "Yeah." And she died of violent death with her brother. And I said, "Before or after graduation?" And she said, "After graduation." And I said, "Oh my gosh." And we were never friends. I knew her, I knew hi, bye, that type of thing, but we were never
Mhm.
in the same group of friends.
Right.
And I didn't understand why she was by me. And she couldn't tell me either. And I said, "Well, it's coming close to our reunion. Did she want me to go back home again to that state and say, hey, she's okay?" But I didn't go back. I mean, I couldn't.
Yeah.
And so then we met again another time, and she said, "She's with you and her brother." And I said,
Oh, wow.
"Really?" I said, because I wasn't going to ask. She said, "Yeah, they're hanging around you." But she said she won't communicate why she's by you. Well, if you don't think that freaked me out, what is she hanging around me for?
And not asking any questions. What's going
Yes,
on?
yes.
Little
Finally,
creeper.
she was. She was. Finally, we met another time. And before we left the restaurant, I said, "Please tell me they're not with me anymore." And she said, "No, they're not." I go, "Phew." A year later, they finally disappeared on me, which I'm glad because it kind of freaked me out. It's like, what does she want from me? And she's not communicating,
Right.
you know?
Yeah.
But she did tell about the firemen. And she said, things that people need to be aware of is watch for signs. Okay. So, and that started after my daughter and her son went to the bathroom, came back, and they were crying. And I'm like, "Are you okay?" And she said, "This was the fireman's song. He loved this song." And it happened to be their neighbor next door. And then we went outside, said our goodbyes. As we're saying our goodbye, a fire truck pulled up to the building next door. And as you and I were
That's cool.
talking at the park,
Uh-huh.
and I was telling you this story, remember a fire truck pulled up. And
Yes.
it's like, okay, he wanted his wife to know he's okay. And he also said he had died before he hit the ground, so it wasn't painful or anything, and that he loved his wife and that the funeral was something unexpected. He said they had put on such a he said he just didn't deserve the funeral and the whole process that went through. He was just amazed at how people went out of their way for him. So
That's sweet.
yeah, so it's good things. And my daughter finally told the neighbor's wife that he's okay and everything. And so yeah, you can learn a lot. You just have to open up and be willing to accept the good and keep out the evil.
Yeah.
You know
Yeah.
so yeah, we've had so many different things happen. And matter of fact, I'm going to have lunch with her next week again. I haven't seen her in a year, so it'll be kind of fun to get back together again. And
Yeah. That would be nice.
yeah, I mean, she has done the Stanley Hotel. She's helped solve a murder mystery with an unidentified body. And they actually got the killer who killed him.
Nice.
Yeah, so she has been very helpful with the police department also.
It's good to
So,
hear that the police department is getting into the psychic side of solving problems because it's going to be so helpful to find some of these people,
well, yeah.
It's just
Well,
wow.
the guy had no identification on him. He wasn't even from the state that he was killed in.
Mm,
And she didn't tell me a lot because she couldn't, but she said
right.
they did catch the person who killed him. So
Nice.
yes, she's very knowledgeable on so many things. She's helped me, like I said, helped me pass through with my mom, knowing my mom is there. She loves me. I watch for signs. Same with my dad. I know certain things, you know, remind me of my dad, like Pennies from Heaven. When that
Yeah.
song plays, that's my dad. He's
Yeah.
thinking of
Awesome.
me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's so cool.
But
Yeah, I've had a few signs with my mom since she passed, so it's been pretty cool. I've been lately talking to her through my pendulum, so that's been really cool.
wow, I've never heard of that.
Yeah, she's got a different form. When I typically talk on my pendulum, I get a certain yes and a certain no. But when my mom is coming through, she has a completely different yes and no. And it's like, I know it's her because she's the only one that's given me such a different answer. I mean, it's not different answers, but a different way to answer it.
You
So,
know it's her.
so I know it's her.
Oh yeah. I mean,
Yeah, it's really
there's
cool.
there's so many stories out there of people, things that have happened, and I know I probably forgot a whole bunch of things right now, but yeah, I strongly believe, and I know, there's a lot of good out there. You just have to look
Yeah,
for it. We've
that's true.
eaten, yeah, we've eaten at lunch. She'll say, "You see that man sitting there alone? His wife is there beside him." And I
Nice.
go, "Oh man." But my sister can see and I can feel things. I mean, sometimes I can't see figures. Sometimes I see shadows, and you probably do too, where you know that somebody's there by you,
Hmm.
but you can't really see them. You just have I don't know what you want to call it. You just know they're there beside you.
Yep. It's clairsentient, I think that would be
Okay.
clairsentient because you can feel it, but you can't. It's Yeah, it's clairsentient because you can actually feel it. You're not actually seeing it or anything. It's a feel. Kind of like when what was it like just this morning, yesterday, I opened up one of the closets in my bathroom and nothing different. And when I went to close it, I got this really strong scent of orange. It beats me what the orange is all about, but I got a strong scent of orange, and I'm like, where is that coming from? So I don't know what's going, but that would be a clairsentient too.
Oh yeah. And you just, it's hard to explain things to people because they
Right.
think, you know, we had gone to an estate sale years and years ago, and the drapes were pulled and it was dark, and then the cash register and the lady running the estate sale was there, and we walked in the house and I go, oh my gosh, I don't feel good. And my husband said, let's just look real quick and then we'll get out. Well,
Hmm.
of course my husband asked the lady running, do you ever feel things in the house, because she does all these estate sales. And she said, yeah, I do, come here. And she took us in the bathroom. She said, it smells like he just had a cigar in here,
Yeah.
and he had died like I don't know how many years before, 3, I think she said.
Oh, wow.
And I go, Kurt, I got to get out of the house. Well, as I'm checking out, my husband got a couple books and a couple little things, and as we're checking out, I look up behind her, and there is the biggest black cloud behind her, and that freaked me out because I know that's evil. And
Yeah.
she said, oh, he's so happy with me doing the sale. And I thought, no, he's
No, he's
not. I
not.
went, no, I blessed everything before I even put it in the car. I said,
Yeah.
I got to cast all the
Yeah.
evil out, because it freaked me out knowing that I could actually see this.
Yeah. I did a cleansing meditation one time, and part of the meditation is to have your thumb up on your forehead, kind of like this, so that what you're doing is you're taking all your negative energy and all your negative feelings, everything, and building it up and putting it right in your third eye. And then at the end, you blow all of that out. And when I did that, I saw this puff of black cloud come out of my mouth. And on my second breath of cleansing, I saw another cloud, but it wasn't as dark of a black, it was more of a gray. And then the third time it come out, it was just a light, soft cloud of gray. So
So
it
you
was
got
almost
rid of it.
clear. Yeah, so I got rid of a lot of that, which was I've never had that happen to me before until then, and that was just like that was incredible. That was
Oh,
incredible.
yeah. I mean,
And
it's
and with the feeling, I recently went through a class with my sister. She's a Reiki master, and she went through the class with me. And so we started doing Reiki, and I'm an empath. So when I was doing the Reiki, I got to one part, one section of her, and I got so dizzy. I was just about ready to pass out. My stomach got all twisted and curly, and I was like, I'm not feeling well. And then it's like my lower back was hurting and everything. It's like, I got to stop. I got to stop. And I sat down. I started feeling better once I got away from her and sat down. And the one that trained my sister, she's like, "You're an empath, aren't you?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And she goes, "You don't do Reiki."
I was gonna say because you pulled everything to you.
Yeah, I took everything on as myself. If I was to do Reiki, I need to practice more of putting my shield up so I don't collect that person's illness or whatever. I have to push it back on them and just help them heal and not bring it on as my own pain.
And that's practice,
Yeah, it's practice.
a lot of practice. But
Yeah.
yeah, and I wish
Yep.
there was more people out there that was are willing to talk about it, you
Yeah.
know. And we watch a lot of shows on YouTube too of life after death. And there's some people that have come back and they haven't they died, but they have come back. And a lot of them are surgeons, doctors, and they're very good at telling what they went through and what the other
Mhm.
side is. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, it's very interesting. And I think people just need to be positive and get along.
Yeah. I've recently been watching YouTube stories of children that like under the age of like 6 or so, they start having talking about all these experiences that there's no possible way they would know, like about wars way back in the 1800s or this and that happening, and having fears of this or having pains of that, and to find out that it was their a life that they had before. Like some of the kids were talking about their other parents, or fear of their parents leaving them, and the parents had no idea, but it's because they were related in a past life and they had died. So the child is reliving that past life and scared that they're going to leave and not come back. I mean, and some of them were in a war and got injured. Some remember being hit by a plane that was crashing and this child was on the ground. Um, it's just so fascinating.
It's kind of like what they call an old soul.
Yes, an
Yes.
old soul, you're able, when you like some of these stories, when they're not even 1 years old and they're already having full conversations.
Yep.
That's an old soul. So they have all this experience. They just can't hide back. They just have to tell it. They have to go forth.
Well, they don't know any different either.
Right, right.
They're innocent kids and stuff like that. But yeah, there's
Yeah.
there's a lot out there we don't know yet. We need to experience. One more thing, real quick, before um, people need to realize too, your pets come
Yes.
back. I had
Yes.
I had a dog that every time I didn't feel good or I was sick, I'd go lay on the couch or whatever, and he'd come and join me all the time. He was my caregiver. And every now and then, now he hasn't so much because we've gotten two other dogs, and I think their personalities have gone in because now our
Yeah,
male dog is just like him.
you're right.
Yeah, but before we got them, I'd be laying in bed or whatever, and then all of a sudden the bed would just go down, like something jumped on the bed. And it took me a while, it freaked me out for a while. And then I realized it had to be my dog coming to because I wasn't feeling good and he came to lay beside me. But I looked around going, what is on my bed?
Yeah.
So yeah, so be aware of different pressures, whatever. But yeah, dogs can come back too. And I was
Yeah.
shocked.
All your pets can come back. Yes.
Yep.
Yes, it's pretty awesome. Well, how about we close at this point?
Okay.
Um, so I really thank you for coming on the show. I appreciate it. And thank you so much for your time.
Well, good luck to you. And hopefully people really believe it's true. I mean, I didn't believe my sister years ago, and I wish I would have opened up and, understood her. But it took me a few years to realize there is other things on the other side.
Don't worry, it took me forever too to realize, hey, there's something going on.
Yeah.
Yep. So if anybody would like to be a guest on the show, again, email lighttalk423@gmail.com, or you could go in the comments below and say, guest, please. And while you're at it, please click your like, subscribe, and share buttons. And let your friends and neighbors and relatives and everybody know if they have stories. Come talk to me and we'll see what we can do. Well, thank you again for being on the show. And
And good
I
luck.
so enjoyed having you here. And we will talk with you later.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Bye.
Bye.